Really excited for Allie to come on up and start out the presentations on ice skating.
Hello! Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Alrighty, so my name is Allie. I'm from the East Coast, but I've been here for about 10 years. I first got into Nordic ice skating about 5 years ago from my cousin, and I've been in love with it ever since. So this is a brief overall presentation of planning, preparation, and then hitting the ice. So we're going to start off with what is ice skating. It's skating on all different types of natural ice. So you can use any kind of different skate for this, and I brought a little prop. You can use a figure ice skate, a hockey skate, but I use a Nordic skate. So this is attached at the toe and it is unattached at the heel, and this allows you to travel farther, faster, and easier over rough ice. And this is the shot my friend Adrian got of me at Rabbit Lake last week. Hopefully you guys were able to experience that magical spot. Yeah. All right, safety gear and considerations. So falling to the ice, if you were to fall to the ice, make sure you have your ice picks, your ice pole, extra clothes, and a dry bag, throw rope, warmth of some sort. And then to prevent injury, make sure you have your helmet or knee or elbow pads. And then for flotation, make sure you either have a life vest, a flotation backpack, which is when you put air in your backpack and you have to have a strap in between your legs in order to keep it on you and to support you well enough. Or a dry suit, which also obviously has air inside of it and will help you be buoyant. I brought some ice picks as well. I should probably move these closer. So ice picks you wear around your neck, and if you fall in, shout out to Luke Mel, who's also here. He has a wonderful ice rescue course that will teach you how to fall into ice and get out of it successfully and easily. So you put these on your neck, you pull them out from your neck, and you jab them into the ice. There's also a little emergency whistle as well. These ones are great. And then, let's go. Oh, I also wanted to include this portion. A lot of people do bring pets out on ice, but I did want to just emphasize the risk of that. Then it's totally okay to bring a pet on ice, but make sure you test the ice, make sure you know where the open water is at, and if you do bring your pet on the ice, make sure you have a leash ready, all that sorts of things, because 85% of rescue efforts are because of pets. So just food for thought, keep that in mind. So there are many websites to use when you're looking for ice. This is just my quick approach that I normally use. I start off at Sentinel Hub or Sentinel Playground, and this is a great example because Eagle and Symphony is in right now. So I just took this screenshot yesterday. I usually use Sentinel L2A. They have a really great shot, and then on the upper right-hand corner is where you can choose your satellite, and then on the upper left-hand corner is where you can choose your date, and it'll give you real-time imagery of what's going on there and what it looks like, except if there are clouds. If there are clouds, you can't see anything, which is kind of annoying, but you work around it. So Sentinel gives you really crisp images. Landsat gives you more frequent images, but they're not as clear, so Sentinel is always my go-to. And then you're always looking for cracks in the water, you're looking for where the snow line is and sunlight exposure where the shades of the mountains are, because that ice could be thicker or thinner where the sun is shining more. And flowing water areas, look for rivers, because that ice is going to be thinner because water is constantly moving under it. So if you're looking for many things on a satellite, these tools are super helpful. And the second application that I use is Windy, and it's an app. I just took these screenshots off my phone. I use this almost every day just for normal weather checking, but this is great for looking for ice. Temperature fluctuations, the wind, where it's pushing the snow. If there's snow, you can look at past weather temperatures and the UV index, and then if it's raining. It's just a wonderful tool. You can put the cursor on a specific lake, and then it'll just pop up all this wonderful information that you can use to plan out your trip. I did put a QR code there. Oh, hello. I put a QR code there, Luke Mel's ice course. I learned all of this from his ice course. Super helpful information, cannot recommend it enough. So if you're interested, highly recommend. And then also there's other ways to find ice, obviously social media. There are many platforms you can look for, or friends or people just chatting. They're great ways to find ice. So for testing ice, my favorite tool is this guy right here. This is an ice pole or an ice probe. At the very end of this, here, give me 1 second. So I don't know if you can see it. I'll hold it up. It's kind of just a giant spear, but it's a weighted metal end. Super sharp, super dangerous. But it's wonderful for ice testing on the fly, on the go. It's very quick. And you just jab it a few times and you can see how thick the ice is. So right here is my friend Gabriella. We were up at Palmer Lakes in Hope when the ice first hit. It was a wonderful day, but there was a lot of variable ice, different textures. So we tested the white ice. It had been there for a while, and it was good to go. So then we popped on over to the shelf of the black ice, which was fresher, poked it a few times, and it was also good to go. So without putting ourselves in much risk, we were able to test all the ice we were going to be skating on that day. Rock throwing is also used. It is less scientific, but a lot of people do use it. And just remember, if you do use the ice or the rock throwing method, to take your rock with you and put it on the side of the lake so that the lake is just not littered in rocks for other skaters. And then ice screws and ice gauges. So this is an ice screw, and you screw it into the ice, and it'll tell you how deep the ice is and how thick it is and what quality of the ice it is. So black ice is what my friend is poking at, is the strongest ice, and white ice is thinner. So that's just heads up there as well. And then also this screenshot was pulled off of the Nordic, or the Southcentral ice skating page. This gentleman named JC makes these wonderful ice gauges, and he 3D prints them, and there's the QR code if you want to print your own. If you have a 3D printer, go for it. But those are also great tools to use. All right, and communication. As with everything, know your group, know what their level is, know what they're comfortable doing, and if you're uncomfortable doing something, always feel free to voice that and say, hey, this ice is a little bit thin for me, I think I'm gonna sit this one out. Just remember, there's always a risk with ice, but just listen to your comfort level and talk to your friends and make sure communication is there. And if somebody were to fall on the ice, communicate who's going to do what or what the protocol is. All right, so deep to long, all day and night, and I mean it. So we did this trip last week. It was a wonderful, epic, amazing trip. We started off at the Glen Alps Trailhead. We popped up on top of Little Allie, and then we went up the ball field and headed down to Deep Lake, which is that first photo. That's Paxson skating on that lake. And yeah, it was a bunch of white ice. It was pretty old, and the ice, the photo next to it, to the right, is the ice kind of fraying off like paper, which was a kind of cool formation of it. I wanted to include that there. And then the third photo is us heading down the Scree Gully into Black Lake, which you can see there. Black Lake was amazing. Black Lake was full of black ice, so it really it made sense. We had a ton of fun there. The ice was extremely thick. I think it was about 6 inches throughout. We spent a lot of time, maybe too much time there. And that's Tiger the dog having a great time. And that's Laura Kalowski. I don't know if you guys are familiar with her work, but she's a figure skater in Colorado, and she's awesome. But she's having some fun under the mountains as well. And then we headed off to Willowa Lakes. That first photo is of us heading down the valley into Willowa Lakes. It was a nice little jaunt over there. The second photo is of the cool bubble formations that we were exploring. And then that third photo is Upper Willowa Lakes, which we had to skip because we were running very behind. But the ice was super, super good. And then we ended up on Walrus Lake at sunset. It was an insane skate. Ice was amazingly thick, smooth throughout. I believe this lake was also about 6 inches, and it was probably one of the best days of my life, if I'm honest. But it was super cool. That's Paxson and skating there. And then these are some photos of Walrus Lake. As you can see, the ice is extremely smooth. We tested it a ton, went through all the areas of testing, and then we had some fun, and we skated around for a bunch of time as well. But this was one of those moments where you're skating around, you feel like you're floating, and you just feel so free, and it was a phenomenal feeling. And then we headed down to Long Lake. So the first photo is us heading down from Walrus Lake into the valley, and then we arrived at Long Lake just as it was getting dark. It got pitch black immediately. The middle photo is Laura, posing in front of the moonlight. It's a gorgeous skate. And then the last photo is kind of a realistic view, just all darkness. But we, going back to communication, before we headed down Long Lake, we made sure to talk to each other and say, hey, who's going to go first, who has what, how are we going to test? And so it was super effective. No one took a swim, which is always great. And we got through the lake safely in the dark. And yeah, that concludes Deep to Long, all day and all night.
How was the ice on Long Lake?
Amazing, beautiful, especially closer to town. The farthest end of the lake was a little bumpy, but most of it was just amazing and safe. I definitely want to go back in the daylight and see what it actually looks like. Yeah. So with that, I'll hand it on off. And yeah, thank you.
All right. So I think Allie did a great job kind of introducing what wild ice skating is and some of the basic concepts in safety. And I wanted my part of the presentation here to be more about the backcountry applications of wild ice skating. So how it can kind of be integrated with some of the other types of backcountry travel that you all are probably familiar with. And then also just kind of why it works as a standalone activity in the backcountry that can kind of hold its weight in its own right. So this is just a quick list of some of the multi-sport trips that we've either done or you could do. One thing to point out quickly is wild ice skating, it tends to work best in low snow conditions. It's really hard to skate through ice that has snow on it, so we tend to look for times like this where it's kind of cold and you have good ice formation, but before you have a lot of snow. That said, sometimes it'll snow a bunch, and then the ice will come in on a lake, and you'll be able to ski to the lake on really great snow, and then also have really great ice. So I made a quick list of other backcountry endeavors that you could combine with skating. Hiking is a really obvious one. The background photo here, that's actually Tim who found the wallet. He's also good at being a tiny skater on big lakes. So that was up at Reed Lakes on October 4 this year, which is wild. It's such an early start to the season. But we heard a report that there might be ice up there, and we decided to hike up there. And it's like, even if the ice ended up being really good, but even if it hadn't been good, we've gone on a nice hike. Biking, fat biking, combined, those tend to be low snow activities, so they work really well with skating. Pack rafting, we've been talking with buddy Thor down in Juneau about doing a combined pack raft and Nordic skate trip where there's kind of a lake chain you would skate and then pack raft out. Ice climbing, skiing, I'll mention those things in the next slides. Rollerblading, I have never rollerbladed to go skating. It just seemed like there should be at least 6 things here. The list felt unbalanced otherwise. But you totally could go rollerblading to ice right now. I mean, all the trails around Anchorage are snow-free, and then there's ice in places like Goose Lake. So I'm not saying I've done this, but you totally could. And if you do it, post something about it. One thing about skating that's kind of cool is, you can, as Allie said, you can skate on all different kinds of skates. There's some really, really light hockey skates. There's some really light figure skates. And then Nordic skates are, they use your ski boot. So oftentimes you don't even need to bring an extra boot to go skating. You just bring your skates and you can ski right up to the edge of the lake and then clip your skis off, clip your skates on, and immediately go out. So skates, there isn't a huge amount of heavy gear that you need to go skating. So it can complement other types of sports pretty easily. Packing a pair of Nordic skates or really lightweight hockey skates or figure skates into a backpack it's a pretty minimal add for potentially huge bonus on a backcountry trip. These are a couple photos from a trip we did in the spring to Anatuvik Pass. That's Tim again of the wallet fame in the middle, and then Laura Kotowski doing some figure skating lower down. We were mostly planning on skating on this trip. There wasn't a super long ski portion, but the skating ended up being kind of marginal. That was just really, really beautiful looking ice that you can kind of see in the background there, but it ended up being covered in overflow. So it's just all really, really wet. So really pretty to look at, not the best to skate on, but I got a good ski tour in up the Anatuvik River Valley, which is also just super, super pretty. So I would say if you're a Nordic skater, skiing and skating are just incredibly complementary things, and just huge potential for doing long distance combined trips where you could be hiking, skiing, or skating, and just seamlessly going between those two or three different things. Climbing, I'm not a climber, so I don't know if any of the climbers in here look at that ice and think that looks good or absolutely garbage, but when we're skating around Alaska, we see waterfalls and ice coming into lakes all the time. This is a relatively smaller one. Obviously, this is on Crescent Lake, kind of early last year. If anybody, this isn't something that I've done personally, but for any of the climbers out there, I think it's probably something worth considering, that you have a lot of lakes that have big cliffs and water kind of going over those cliffs into the lakes, and skating allows you to cover a huge amount of distance. So if there's a big lake where there's potential for climbing, being able to skate to a climb is just something that could be super cool. Skating and biking, also just super complementary because they're both low snow pursuits. Obviously, you can't fat bike through deep powder, and you can't really skate through deep snow. But in lower snow conditions, there's tons of places where you can go biking to really good skating, and either you can kind of this is a Skiak Glacier Lagoon. This is a great place where you can bike out, cover a lot of distance over the dirt, mixed ice, gravel, on the sandbar, and then get to the edge of the lagoon, leave your bike, and just do some really awesome skating. Another place would be the Spencer Glacier trip, or any number of kind of bike. There's a ton of places you could do this. I think I see this most around the glaciers, because the skating is so spectacular, but you can't skate all the way to the glacier lagoons usually. So it makes a lot of sense for places like this. And then I wanted to include this slide just to show how many big water bodies we have in Southcentral Alaska. And there's really no faster way to explore a water body than on ice skates. We can really easily cover, or really just about anybody with fairly minimal effort can cover, dozens of miles in a day on skates, whereas, hiking or even skiing an equal distance would be quite a bit more work. So when conditions obviously are not always great for skating these lakes, some of these lakes we've been watching for years and we've never quite seen conditions that are right for getting out on them. But when conditions are good, I think it's just a really incredible way to explore a lot of the terrain in Alaska. One of my favorite anecdotes, or little pieces of skating history, by the way, is from a period in the 1700s to maybe the mid to late 1800s. That's when you started getting metal skate blades, and skating became really popular in Europe. And during this period, skating was actually the most efficient way for a human being to travel, period. You didn't really have steam engines yet or you did, but they were quite slow and inefficient. And there's a famous story from around the 1870s of a skater challenging a locomotive engineer to race in the UK. And they had this great skate and train race, and the skater won. I don't think a skater would still win against, a snow machine or some of the other modes of travel we have now, but I think it's really cool that there was this period where skating was kind of this form of like teleporting, where people could go from one place to another and then back in the UK, and you could cover like 100 miles in a day. And this was just a really magical, kind of amazing period for skating. And even though it's not like that now, it's not the most efficient way, or it's not literally the fastest way that people can move. I think it still speaks to just skating's place in the world of outdoor sports. It's just this, it's a very graceful, fast, efficient, well, sometimes graceful, it depends on the skater, but it's just a really fast, efficient, incredible way to move through natural places. At least for me growing up, we always really thought of skating as something you do indoors on a rink. And I think changing that mindset to think of skating as something that you do in these amazing outdoor spaces that we have in Alaska, and it's not just something you can do, it's like the best thing to do. I think it's, I think skating kind of deserves its place alongside skiing, fat biking, mountaineering, some of the other really cool things that we have always thought of as outdoor sports in Alaska. So it's a mindset thing. It's it's a very unique and special way to travel in the outdoors. I thought this would be fun to just show 2 GPS tracks just to kind of hammer this point home. The track on the left, the kind of red-pink one, that's from a backpacking trip through ADAC that I did a couple of years ago. And you can see we're trying to like avoid the hills, and then we kind of side hill down something, and then we're trying not to lose elevation. We're kind of going on this bench, and then we're trying to shoot the lowest point in this pass, and then go over the pass and keep moving. You're trying really, really hard to move in this kind of maximally efficient way. And then this is Walrus Lake. This is actually the trip that Allie did the trip report from. And you can tell we got to Walrus Lake, and we're just like, running all around, just having fun. It's, skating you can use as just a practical way to get from point A to point B, but I think it's also just a really, really joyful way to interact with the outdoors. And I think you can kind of see in this GPS track, maybe, I hope it comes through that just like how fun it was to explore everywhere. And I hope this also, you can see like looping around the little islands and stuff, exploring all the shores, all the, the side of the lake. And I think most ways of travel in the outdoors in the backcountry, you just don't really see GPS tracks like that, because it's just a very different, it's just a less efficient way to move, and skating's just a efficient way to cover a lot of ground, and it's also just really friggin' fun. So I'm going to do a super quick trip report here. This was Skiak Lake last year. I've been looking at Skiak for years, just kind of hoping it would come in, and then last year it's kind of a bunch of things came together at once. I had some friends looking at satellite imagery, and then Luke, as Luke Mel does, got out there first, and then we got out there right after, a day or two after, I think Luke did it, and we got to go on this really incredible kind of overnight skating adventure. And this was actually before we did the Anaktuvuk Pass trip last spring, so this was the first time I'd ever done an overnighter as a skating trip, and that was a really interesting kind of mental shift for me, thinking of skating. It's really easy to think of skating as like you drive up to the edge of a lake, you put your skates on, you go around, you have fun, you leave. And this for me really unlocked this feeling of wow, you can really skates are really a tool for exploring. I mean, this felt like we were on a proper mini expedition or something, even though we stayed in cabin. So I'll go through this quickly. So this is getting there. Pulling up to the parking lot and just looking out into this absolutely vast kind of void. And I think everybody in this group, we were just so excited to see this. Like, there's just this kind of rush of excitement when you drive up to something, and after seeing it on the satellite images, and it's really low res, and then you drive up and you get out of your car, you walk out on the ice, you see it's thick enough, and it's so thrilling to realize like, wow, like this is actually going to work, guys. Like, this is kind of amazing. I also love that there's always summer-oriented signage at all these lakes. So there's always like life jackets and like stuff about fishing and whatever. And you know, it feels like we're kind of doing something very different and special and strange, which, you know, kind of are. So big water bodies, like Skiak Lake, they tend to have more complicated and bigger forces. I'd personally never seen as many leads on a lake as we did on Skiak. A lead's a place where the ice fractures and pulls apart. A pressure ridge is kind of the reverse, where the ice fractures and then gets, or it's pushed together, causing it to fracture and then mound up. So we saw a lot of these really complicated, funky little systems of leads and pressure ridges, and they're always a little bit tricky to cross. You tend to get kind of weird little bits of open water, kind of unstable ice if it's piled up. And then, it's having the testing pole, which you can see Tim is carrying a proper testing pole, and then we also had some ski poles and stuff. Those testing poles are absolutely critical for getting across these safely. And I'd never used one before, but on this trip, we just started letting Tim go first. And it's like, all right, dude, you figure it out. And we'll come behind with the dog. One of the really cool things about Skiak was just these huge headlands and these islands, and just lots of like little bays, and there were caves, and just it was such interesting terrain to explore. Just really dramatic, and I really didn't know ever what to expect kind of coming around each bend. I love this one little island. It has this little tiny tree right on the top. Kind of almost looks like a palm tree or something. But yeah, just I forget how, I think Skiak is, I want to say it's about 40 square miles, so it's pretty substantial. And on a lake that big, it's very different from just, you know, showing up to a lake like Goose Lake and then doing laps. Like on a lake this big, you kind of have this feel like you're exploring an inland sea, or, you know, it's really just this, I think it's something that I felt before going into the mountains and like coming up a pass and seeing like a huge new valley in the Arctic spread out in front of you, where you're just really excited to kind of find out like what's down this ravine, how are we going to move through here, where are we going to go, what are we going to see. It's just a lot of surprise and excitement on this trip. So most of our group turned around at kind of the halfway point on this trip, and they went back, so it was just a day trip for them, and then 4 of us continued on. So we skated across the lake. We went through this channel between a big island and the mainland. It's called the Irish Channel. It's like kind of funny that there's a water feature on Skiak Lake called the Irish Channel. I'm sure there's history behind it, but this was a smaller island kind of on the far side of the lake too. And just really beautiful ice out there. But one thing I'll point out is that, you know, if you look at the ice in the foreground, you can see there's just some really beautiful like A-grade ice. And then there's also this kind of ice where there's some adhered snow, and it looks kind of crunchy and crumbly and stuff. So that stuff is really easy to avoid. If you can, maybe you don't know what you're looking for, but if kind of directly below the person, that white ice there, that's where there's some snow adhered to the ice. You can sometimes skate through that, but it's not super pleasant to. So it's really easy to avoid when there's no snow on the ice, but when there is snow, you can't avoid, you know, crunchy ice like that. You can't see cracks that you could lodge a blade in. So skating with snow becomes a lot more difficult. This is around the kind of the farthest side of Skiak Lake that we went to, and we kind of ran into a bunch of open water where the Skiak River pours into Skiak Lake. Calling it Skiak River, honestly, in the winter is pretty charitable. It's like 6 inches deep. So it didn't feel very rivery, but it did create a fairly substantial section of open water on the lake. So we easily could have just skated around it, but instead we wanted to make life more difficult for ourselves. So we skated up onto the beach, and we kind of connected up little channels that had frozen solid. And then we actually skated across the river on this kind of slumping ice bridge, which was funny. We did it one by one. It felt sketchy, even though, again, like literally the water was 6 inches deep. In general, you want to avoid open water or be extremely cautious around open water when you're on skates. Obviously, probably the biggest risk that you can encounter with Nordic skating is getting pulled under the ice. And where that's by far the most likely is if you're skating on a river that has really inconsistent ice, or I mean, rivers tend to just have very inconsistent ice, but that's where you're, the most danger would probably lie in getting actually pulled under that. So I titled this Crossing the Skiak River, but I did want to point out, you want to be really, really cautious on actual rivers as opposed to little tiny, almost dry creeks. This was some really cool ice on kind of right where we got back onto this Skiak Lake. And one of my favorite things about wild ice skating is that ice is just an insanely interesting, beautiful thing, just medium. And I think it's really, really underappreciated in a way. And you just never realize how cool ice is until you start skating. And you'll think that you've seen like everything there is to see, and then you'll see something, that just blows your mind 2 trips later. This was an area where there had obviously been some really thin snow ice, so the ice had initially formed, maybe gotten some snow on it, then water pulled up into it, and then it froze, and then it got broken apart by the wind and pushed to the far side of the lake. So these plates turned on their sides, and they all got piled up on the far side of the lake. At least that's what I think happened. Kind of conjecturing about why the ice is the way it is. It's something that we talk about all the time, and kind of get in little arguments about like, no, this must be the reason for this, or it's always a source of kind of lively conversation, just trying to tease out like, what the heck are we looking at, and why is the ice doing what it's doing? And sometimes you feel like you can solve it. Like here, I'm pretty sure we got it, but sometimes you just end up kind of scratching your head and just sort of marveling at it and then skating on. So we booked a night at the Dorschen Bay Cabin, which is super cool. Usually, I feel like the cat's slightly out of the bag now, and people are starting to book cabins during Nordic skating season a little bit more often. But frequently, this is a really hard time of year to book public use cabins because people don't really know if there's going to be enough snow, or if there's going to be snow or ice or open water. And if there is open water, people don't want to deal with open water and sub-freezing temperatures. So a lot of the time in the winter, especially at these lakeside cabins, you can find you're often able to make reservations kind of in the dead of winter, which is or during skating season, which is pretty cool. So we snagged this cabin, which is normally, I think, really hard to get a reservation for in the summer, and we got it like a night before reservation. So we got to, this is how we were able to turn this trip into a quick and easy overnighter. So Tim got the stove going, and they all played Uno. I was absolutely exhausted, so I took a photo of them playing Uno, and then I went to sleep. But one thing about this trip, we started really not, we knew that there would almost certainly be good weather the first day, but we didn't really know what to expect for the second day, and it looked like there was some snow moving in at some point. So I think there was, despite the fun Uno playing, I think there was a little bit of nervousness. We were just kind of like, man, what are we going to see tomorrow? Like, we didn't really know what we were going to wake up to. And like I said, snow isn't great to skate in. It can cause a lot of problems. So we go to bed. We're all feeling optimistic because we've had this amazing day. And then we wake up the next morning to this, which is just this thick white void. And I would say the mood was like we were good, but we got down to we were nervous until we got our skates on and realized we could skate. Not because we'd be in huge trouble. If we hadn't been able to skate, we would have just walked out. But we're really thinking, man, are we gonna have to walk out like 15 miles or something just across this lake? It'd just be kind of a slog. But luckily, we were able to go slow, and it worked out. We were fine. Some of that kind of crunchy ice where there's the snow adhered to it was quite a bit harder to skate across. But as long as we went fairly slow, I don't think anybody took a bad spill or anything. The worst that we ran into is sometimes we just had to walk in our skates. We were all on Nordic skates, and actually just walking in Nordic skates isn't really that bad for a short distance. If we'd had to go very far, we would have just clipped our skates off though and kept walking in our ski boots, which also isn't really that bad. So yeah, this is fairly close to the car. It's Frying Pan Island in the background. Luckily, we were able to see the leads pretty easily, even though there was snow on the ice. That's one thing we were nervous about, that there could be a lead that wasn't very visible because the ice had just pulled apart. And then you could get a little tiny skin of like a 1/4 inch ice over it. And we thought, we were worried that we could just skate into something like that. But luckily, there was enough upwelling in this wet snow and because of the wet kind of high temperatures that all the features on that lake were really easy to spot. So yeah, this is a GPS track of our trip. I mean, 40 miles it's not like this is the most insane amount of distance to cover in about 24 hours. I'm sure there's plenty of people here who have covered that amount of distance on a bike or on skis. But I think what makes skating different in a way is that it's just so easy. I mean, I don't think any of us finished tired at all. I think if we wanted to, we probably could have made this a 100-mile trip. I guess it's easy to say things and not actually do them. But yeah, I mean, we only explored a fairly small portion of this lake, really. I mean, we covered maybe 40% of the coastline. So there's just a lot left to explore out here. And it's kind of exciting having, this great 24-hour trip covering 40 miles of this huge lake, having this great adventure, and then thinking like, man, there's still a lot left that we have to cover back here. So I think we finished this trip all thinking like, man, I can't wait to go back. And it's always good to end wanting more, I think. So yeah, thanks for coming to the Wild Ice presentation. That's my dog, it's Tyga. It just kind of has to be included. That's on Rapid Lake. But yeah, thanks for having us and for coming. I don't know, do we have time for like a Q&A still?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. Allie, do you want to come back? If anybody has questions.
Is there a learning curve between the different skates? Like, if I want to get into this, do I just hop right on Nordic? This seems like the way to go, or should I try different type of ski first?
I think. Do you mind if I take? Okay. I think people come at wild ice skating from a lot of different directions. Growing up in Alaska, a lot of people come at it from hockey. So they're just more comfortable wild ice skating in hockey skates. And I mean, my view is that's totally fine. Like, do what you're comfortable with. I came at it from skiing. I raced a little bit in high school and was just kind of a rec skier after that. So moving into Nordic skating was really natural and easy for me. I would say the learning curve for Nordic skating, for most people, it's really, really quick to learn. Sometimes people are uncomfortable with the thought of having a free heel, but they usually kind of go out on the ice. I mean, this was literally me. Like, I got skates on a whim and just kind of went out 5 years ago, and I had no idea if I was just immediately going to fall on my face or if it was going to be really hard. I clipped them on, kind of took 3 or 4 awkward, baby duck steps, and then it's like, oh, this is super easy. I mean, it's not exactly like walking, but it's a fairly intuitive motion, and there's definitely skill to Nordic skating properly. Shares a lot of technique with speed skating, but I think it's generally very easy to wild ice skate if you start with what you already know, and then just are a little bit patient. Maybe go out on Westchester. The Cuddy Oval in Anchorage is a really good place to learn. Yeah, Allie, do you have anything to?
So I, not being from here, I had never skied before or been in snow before, essentially. So when I first put on my skates, it was very difficult. But I do agree, it was very fast to learn. But the very first few times, it was hard. I fell a lot. I still fall a lot, but I fell a significant amount of times. But I encourage you to stick with it, and it gets easier quickly. But when you first put them on, depending on your background, yeah. Hello, yes.
Are there places locally that rent more than just the skates, but also the safety equipment?
I think that's a you question, maybe.
Horty Marmot's in the process of building up a rental fleet, and I know they're going to try to get some safety equipment. is anybody here from AMH? I don't know if AMH rents safety equipment. I probably shouldn't say either way. I'm not sure. They definitely rent skates.
So you bring your dog, do you have like safety gear or like the booties for your dog for warmth and longer trips?
Yeah, that's a good question. Tig is a Samoyed. He's like pretty much bred for Arctic conditions. He doesn't need booties or anything unless it's really, really cold. I will say he's almost always on a leash when I'm skating with him. The reason he's not on a leash here is because we skated all over Rabbit, and I was confident that there wasn't anything that he could get in trouble doing. But yeah, sometimes he's not stoked to be on this super clear ice too. It's not, dog's not really like slipping a bunch. So he's totally fine on snow ice. This kind of ice, he's sort of like, yeah, okay, whatever, dude, I'll do it. But yeah, bringing a dog skating, I think Allie covered this pretty well. I definitely think that it's a risk, and I would say the same for folks who have kids. Dogs and kids can both be hard to rescue. They can both get way out on unsupportive ice that a rescuer potentially can't get out on. Dogs, I don't have as much experience with kids. Dogs are definitely kind of dumb. I mean, they love them, but you know. And they can do inexplicable weird things. My dog did, like, when he was kind of a puppy, he like swan dived into this open water where there's a creek flowing into Upper Trout Lake, and it was honestly kind of terrifying. He immediately realized what a dumb thing he'd done, and he swam to the edge of the ice, and he put his two front paws on it, and then just wailed piteously. And I, pulled him out, and then he just ran off, like, sticking his tongue out like nothing had happened. I mean, you just have to be mindful of the limitations of the, little dependent creatures that come along with you, and especially the weight difference. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys were out at Portage last season, but it was phenomenal ice for a very long time, and there were patches of snow along the ice as well. And my dog, she does not like black ice and tends to gravitate towards the snow-covered ice. And that ice is thinner than black ice, extremely thinner, depending on how long it's been sitting there. Weaker. Thinner, yeah, weaker. So that is also something to take into consideration. Even if you have them on a leash, they might gravitate towards the snow-covered ice, which is more risk. So, yeah. Oh, yes.
I have a male Samoyed, and he fell through the ice last week at University Lake.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had to go out and get him, and he was crying hysterically. He finally got out.
That sounds like a Samoyeds, yeah.
Really on brand, yeah.
I did not want him down. But he fell through the ice.
Yes, Heather.
I have like two questions. First one, because you mentioned Portage, and a few years ago, maybe even like when the glacier calved while people were on it, your suggestion for distance from glaciers like Portage.
Oh.
So it does calve because, like, if you ever seen, I think you were there, weren't you, Paxson? I don't know. But there's video of it, and so I was just curious, like, your distance recommendation. I'm like always like a half mile, like away.
No, same. I know you have a really amazing video. I calved on me last season, terrifying. The scariest thing ever. And I should have known better because the solar radiation that day was higher, which means the ice is going to be weaker. So stay as far away as you can, but people like to risk it. It all depends on your risk factor.
Do you remember
It's
how
dangerous.
far it like fractured the ice out to?
This would be you.
There have been a few calving events at Portage that have been filmed. The one that I filmed, it was actually really substantial calving event, and we were hundreds of feet from the face, and it broke the ice a ways past where we were, maybe a few hundred feet behind us was all broken. But it probably broke the ice like a quarter mile from the face, maybe even more, actually. I was pretty leery of getting closer to the ice that day. We were, I would say on average, considering how close people get to the face at Portage, we were much, much farther than the average person. I mean, people people skate right up to the calving face. There's a photo on Instagram that somebody posted a couple of years ago of climbing inside the calving face. Cool photo. Definitely not something anybody should do. The risk of calving glaciers. How do you even assess that risk? I mean, how big a calving event can you expect in any one place? I mean, it's really hard to have good, safe intuition around glaciers. I think if you don't know better, it's probably best to give them, stay quite far away. But that said, there are some glaciers that seem pretty quiet in the winter. Like Knik often seems to me like a little more stable than like the big ragged calving face of Portage Glacier. Then again, you're trying to make judgments with what's for most people extremely limited information. I mean, I just don't think people have good intuitions about the danger of ice. I'd be very reluctant to give anybody like a distance recommendation exactly, but probably farther than you think.
And then my second question is, I hear there's several brands of Nordic skates you can purchase. Are there any that you'd recommend?
Allie?
Well, Paxson here makes some wonderful skates. This one right here is an urban skate. This was a limited edition. It's pretty sick. But he's coming out with a ton of new colors I've seen, and they look freaking awesome. These ones are the most durable. They are heavier. There are other brands. They are lighter, more clanky, and they bend easier, in my opinion. I've tried out Zanstra's, and they're so loud, and they don't move through ice as well as these. These are like four-wheel trucks through ice, and I love it. I always feel super sturdy on them and very safe, but they are heavier. So if you're going for weight, the other skates are probably lighter, but this one, I don't know. I really like them. He made them. So.
Sorry, I kind of put you on the spot.
No,
I was kind of half joking, but that was a great.
Yeah, you're good. Oh yes, in the back.
Are you able to determine the ice quality with satellite imagery or just snow cover?
I don't, in my personal experience, no. I always determine ice quality when I get to the body of water. It also depends on whether the ice is fresh or if it's in spring, because spring, you have a lot of kindle ice, and even if it is thicker, it's still weaker. So I would always get to the body of water, which is unfortunate because you want to be able to plan your route and be able to skate, but I would always rely on in-person testing and not satellite imagery for ice quality, but I don't know if you think differently.
It's kind of why I mentioned like when we pulled up to Skiak, it was just so exciting to see that there was this huge sheet of ice there. You just never really know until you go and see it for yourself. But ice can change fairly quickly. A lot of ice can form over a cold night, or ice can get rotten during the day fairly quickly. It can candle when it gets a lot of light on it, a lot of solar radiation, and the crystals break apart at the boundaries, and then you can have 8 inches of ice that just shatters with touch. We don't have a huge amount of candling here like they do in California or Colorado, where there's more intense sun. But at the end of the day, you have to test it yourself while you're there, and you have to test while you're out on the ice too. And that's part of the reason that having an ice testing pole is so valuable. They're kind of weighted so that if you give one really good solid poke, it should tell you whether it's supportive. Once you get a little bit of experience with them, I think it becomes kind of second nature. But yeah, you never know till you go.
One last thing to add, it might be helpful for satellite imagery looking at the weather and the snow coverage a few days prior to your trip and seeing how quickly the ice has changed or how long it's been there. That could give you a good idea of how thick it is or what kind of ice it is. Again, I would always rely on in-person testing, but it could give you a better scope of what you're looking at when you get there. Yeah. In the front.
I just want to recommend that there's a Facebook group. It's Nordic Skate South Central, and lots of people post day to day to day, and that's where I always go to find out what the conditions are, because there's some folks who are posting skating conditions pretty much every day where they've gone, and there are folks who go out almost, every weekend. So you can get a lot of information. It's Nordic Skate South Central Alaska.
Such a great tool.
Yeah.
Oh, also, we made a WSCA Facebook page too. WSCA is Wild Ice Skating Club of Alaska. And if you guys want to join, we're on Facebook. Yeah, we just started. It's taken off like fire, honestly. And we're going to have our first get together soon. But that page also, people are posting a ton of ice. But yes, that Facebook page you mentioned is gold. People are getting out and I love it. There was a few other questions. Far back.
I know the skates come in different lengths, but I don't know exactly what lengths do what.
There's definitely differences of opinion on length for. I assume, do you mean Nordic skates specifically? Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah, I can't speak to hockey skates very much. Yeah, some people are of the opinion that you should basically get the longest Nordic skate you can because they'll even out rough ice best. That said, shorter skates can be a little more playful, a little more maneuverable. Some skates like the Lundhog's T-Skate Pro, or our Urban's shortest size of skate, have a stubbier nose, which it's designed so that you can do step overs a little more easily without tripping yourself. So I would say it's partly based on, sometimes somebody with like a size 48 foot, European sizing, not American, they might want to be on like a 50 centimeter skate, or some companies even used to make, I think it was either Lundhog's or Zanster used to make like a 60. So sometimes people with larger feet might just gravitate toward longer skates, and the reverse is also true. But I personally, I skate all three sizes of Urban skates, and I choose skates more based on what I want to do. If I want to kind of just have fun and weave around in the trees, go short. If you want to really lay out on Kenai Lake and cover a bunch of miles on rough ice, you might want to go longer. The upside is that you can't really go wrong. Sizing a skate is not like sizing a shoe or even like a bike or something. Pretty much anybody can skate any size skate, as long as their boot can fit over the skate.
No, first on the aisle.
Where do you get the ice testing tools and the picks if you fall in and stuff like that?
I kind of hate to be plugging my company too much. I'm trying to stay company agnostic. Urban sells some of the safety equipment here. We sell ice screws. We also sell, these are picks from Skylar Marks. It's a Swedish company, so this is a Swedish pick that we import. These are $25. There are cheaper ice testing tools or ice rescue tools that you can buy at Sportsman's Warehouse and such. Personally, I don't. Some people have preferences about what they want to buy. I don't think it's a place to necessarily save $10, and I also we look a lot to the Scandinavian skaters who have been doing this for decades, Nordic skating specifically, and they've been skating on bays and out in the ocean and huge lakes, and they have a lot of really good safety data and really good safety equipment. So virtually all of the Nordic skates on the market, other than ours, are from Scandinavian companies, and all the safety equipment that I'm aware of, kind of the quality stuff like the poles, is from Scandinavia. There's a company on the East Coast that imports a lot of Nordic skating gear. It's called Nordic Skater, and they sometimes carry. I think they carry. I haven't been on their website in a little while, but they definitely have carried ice rescue equipment, and then also they have the poles. Urban should be carrying the poles in a few weeks, but locally, Horty Marmot is going to also carry these picks. And then AMH often is a really good source for several different brands of ice self-rescue picks. We also, I think I might have said I might have forgotten to bring a throw rope, but having a winter or ice-specific throw rope is often a really good idea. Skylar Marks makes like a really kind of a bigger, like really high-quality expedition type throw rope. There's also a smaller throw rope that Loon Dogs makes that I'm not sure if AMH has carried them in the past. They might be on the Nordic Skater website. Sometimes it's possible to order directly from Scandinavian companies too. It's kind of a crapshoot. It's sort of funny. Sometimes it's cheaper to ship from Sweden than it is to ship from the lower 48. So it's just Alaska life. Yeah.
Oh, if you're done, sorry.
Go ahead.
I do want to mention if you buy ice picks from like Sportsman's Warehouse or Cabela's, not usually, some of them do have the spring capabilities so that it's covered and you have to insert it into the ice and the spring will release the point. I've had a friend who tried to use those and the ice wasn't able to pull the spring back. So I definitely recommend if you're going to invest in ice picks, which you should if you're skating, make sure the pick doesn't have a spring on it. And so you can easily just pop it out. Oh gosh, I say easily. There you go. You can easily just pop it out and it's accessible there for you. The spring-loaded ones, I mean, they sometimes work, but worst case scenario, you always want your gear to work. And also always make sure your ice picks float. That's also another thing.
Yeah.
Talk about using the ears in ice music.
The sound of ice?
That the ice makes.
Yeah. Oh, the sound of ice is amazing. Was there a question?
Or yeah, just.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. So as something super interesting about ice skating is as you are skating as a person on the ice, you yourself, you cannot hear really the sounds that you make accurately. You can only hear other skaters when you're like on land. And the sound of ice is also a great tell of how thick the ice is and how like what you're moving on. And so often there's great YouTube videos online. You can see some people skating on like thin ice, and you'll hear the pitch go up and up and up and up and up until it fails and they break through. And so that's a really good thing to study. But the sound is amazing and beautiful, and it also helps with telling the quality of what you're skating on.
Yeah. One thing we've noticed, sometimes even really thick ice can be really noisy. We've been out on a Kludna where it's just going boom, boom, like endless. It's just such a cool sound, and that you can get that when it's like a foot thick. I think just in addition to ice just being really aesthetically beautiful, I think the sounds are just always super, super interesting. There's the weird sci-fi or whale sounds, and those are always really cool. And then there's the sound of thin overflow starting to crack, and that's maybe the sound that's less ethereal to hear and more like, oh shoot, I need to be probing a little bit more. Yeah.
How many times have you both gone swimming, and what lessons have you learned from those experiences?
Oh man, I've gone swimming a few times. I've never actually gotten, I've never been in the water like up to my head or anything like that. But if you're messing around on Potter Marsh or just, goofing off on thin ice, it's pretty common. You kind of get used to the experience of putting in putting in a foot or putting in a leg, going in up to your waist. One of my first times skating Potter, I broke through and lost my loon hog skate in the mud at the bottom of the kind of lake or muddy, swampy area. And I was like, oh shoot, I was a little bit more of a dirtbag back then. I was like, I cannot afford to lose my skate. So I jumped back into the water after self-rescuing and then went back down and was rooting around, and it was quite the ordeal. I got it. I brought it back to AMH, and they replaced the binding for free, which they didn't have to do, which is pretty sweet. So plug for AMH and my diving ability. Going in, on a more serious note, a lot of people have real concerns about getting wet in the winter. I think, one born and raised here in Alaska, we were kind of trained, like, if you get wet at all when it's cold, like, you'll be dead in 5 minutes. You know, you fall into the water, like, you'll die. You'll sink to the bottom within 3 minutes. You'll instantly die. And I think, you know, it's good to give people a healthy respect for water or being wet in the winter, but it's also, a lot of the danger can be mitigated really effectively with good preparation. So having, you know, throw rope, having your ice picks, having clean, dry, warm clothes, and I guess it doesn't matter if they're clean, but warm, dry clothes, or you know, I'll even bring like when we did our trip, the long lake trip last week, I brought a canister stove in my backpack. So if anybody took a swim, we could pull out a stove, get them in dry clothes. We could get warm water, get them heated up. Yeah, I mean, there's risk with everything that you do in the outdoors. I personally think that Nordic skating, at least what the type of stuff that we're doing, I think the risk is lower than the drive, like almost always. I mean, seriously, you know, I don't think anybody should be too blasé about getting cold or getting wet on a really cold day far from their car, but I would also say it's not something that people should be so fearful about that they just don't go skating at all.
A good rule of thumb, I think, if I remember correctly, it's 1-10-1, where it's if you fall in the water, you have 1 minute to gather your breath, get control of yourself, and think of a plan to get out of the water, and then you have 10 minutes to actually get out of the water, and then you have 1 hour to warm up, or otherwise you'll probably get hypothermia. So that's always a good rule of thumb. So you do have some time, but it's not a lot, and so you should know what to do if you do fall in. I have never fallen in. I've dipped a toe, or not a toe, I've dipped a leg, but thankfully I have these tools so that I don't fall in, because I really don't want to. But yeah.
Yeah, if anybody knows Clint Healer, give Clint grief for falling in, committing the ultimate sin, which is breaking through the ice and getting wet in front of an Anchorage Daily News photographer. Don't let him ever live that down. Okay, that's my final thought. Now, does anybody else have?
You mentioned like an ice-specific throw rope. What is different between like a rope or like something that you use specifically for ice rescue?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say right off the bat, having something is better than having nothing. So when I see people skating around in the winter with like little pack raft throw ropes, I never think like, oh, they should really have a winter rope. I think like, oh, that's awesome that they're aware that, you know, having a rope could be helpful. Winter ropes tend to have a few key differences though. One is that they never have mesh on the sides, because that mesh is an opportunity for snow and ice to get into the rope and freeze the rope, kind of, you know, encase it or make it so that it doesn't, the rope itself doesn't come out easily. So they always have hard sides, and then they have, they're usually encased in a material that's designed to slip on the ice so that they can be kind of like pitched. You know, you could overhand throw them, but you can also do an underhand throw, and they're designed to use a little weight to slide across the ice to a victim. Rescuee is probably a better term. And then the last kind of key difference is that winter ropes tend to have big, or ice rescue ropes would have a lot of big grab handles. So in a pack rafting throwback, for example, some people consider handles to be entrapment hazards. So they're kind of frowned on with some winter ropes, with summer ropes. But winter or ice rescue ropes are designed to have a big fat loop that you can, a rescuee can just put their arm through while they're wearing a big mitten, glove, jacket. So big fat loop, you can kind of put your arm through, get in, and then somebody can pull you out. So superficially, there's super winter and summer ropes are very, very similar, but just a few differences. I personally think that it's worth it to have an ice rescue specific rope, but if people who are just starting out, I think it's good to just to have one at all. You're doing better than a lot of people. I don't know. People may have differences of opinion on the rope issue. I think the Swedes sometimes have like one person carrying a really like a kind of an expedition leader type rope, and then other people might have smaller ropes. There are different ways to do it. your primary way to rescue with ice is to self-rescue with the pick. So I would consider some kind of pick absolutely mandatory on wild ice. Having a rope is something that I think people really should have, especially if you're doing a longer, more remote trip, or there's any kind of increased risk or dicey, chanciness about it. Like on that Skiak Lake trip, we absolutely had multiple people with ropes. But if I'm just going out on, Westchester, and the only person who needs rescuing might be Clint, like I'm not gonna necessarily bring a rope.
I also want to mention a little on the previous question, sorry, but if you do want the experience of falling in the ice, I know Mel does an ice rescue course in person, and you fall in the ice in a controlled environment, and you get the experience of gathering your breath, getting out of the ice, seeing what that feels like, so that in the future, God forbid that ever did happen, you would know what to expect, and you're more comfortable with your ability to get out of the water. I also don't carry a throw rope. I need to get one. It is on my list. But I also agree, the further away you are from your car or from where you are at, then the more gear you should have, 100%. But at the very least, ice picks 100% all the time. Anybody else? I think we're good.
That was great. Okay, that concludes our meeting. So thanks everyone for coming out, and thanks again, Allie and Paxson. That was awesome.